All right, folks, welcome in to Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at Superbook Sports. I'm your host, Ryan Blackburn, at NBA Blackburn on Twitter, part of the Mile High Sports Podcast Network, and I'm excited to talk about Media Day today. Pretty interesting festivities for sure. There was a lot to go over from Media Day today. There's just a madhouse in there. It's my first time, of course. Like everybody knows, I've grown up in Denver. The only team that I've really covered is the Nuggets, and I've gone to other games and whatnot, but this is the first time that I've had this experience just as much as anybody here. So all of this is Greek to me, but excited to be able to go over it and share some insights, share some thoughts on what we're doing today. And then we'll get into the mailbag after that. I asked for questions on Twitter this evening and thought, hey, let's just go over some questions that Nuggets fans still have for this particular podcast, and we'll see where this thing goes, because this should be like, this is the last one. This is the last moment that we have to fully discuss what it's going to look like for the rest of this series. And like, I had this moment after doing Den Vengers last night too. This is like the final preview. This is the final little bit of preview for a series for the 2022-23 season. And that's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool moment. A little bit of it's definitely a sad moment for sure, but I'm excited for where this is going to go. But first, let's go over how the finals are. It's just a different experience, and there was nothing more, I think, visceral about that than walking into media today and walking into the arena after getting my credential, by the way, which you've got all your different finals credentials. It's different from your normal stuff. They have you park in different lots. They have you, all of this stuff is set up in a different way so that they can maximize as many people that are coming to this thing as possible. And I walk into the arena and like the practice is about to open up for the Nuggets. And there are, I kid you not, like 300 people there, just milling around, waiting for this thing to start, just like me. And I'm not surprised, because this is a very, very interesting point. And it's a very important time for the NBA, and this is the place to be if you're the NBA. And if you're a fan, like, you're going to want to come to this. If you're a media person, like, this is something that is a bucket list item for a lot of people, to cover the NBA finals. And it was really cool for me. I got some good video, got some good action from there was a clip that I posted today that went semi-viral of Jokić missing that three-pointer that he hit, like the same style of three that he hit on the left wing over Anthony Davis and LeBron James to win the game. Same style of three. He airballs it by a full 3 feet, and I had a whole bunch of Lakers fans in my mentions being like, he shouldn't have made that against us. It's such a BS shot. And Nuggets fans are just laughing because he will make it in the next game. He's just joking around in practice. But it was very cool to see. And the venue, like, everything is in a different spot. There's a tent, there are multiple arena interview rooms. It's just a wild set of connected, like you've got radio stuff, you've got TV stuff, you've got writer stuff, you've got social crowds, you've got just a variety of stuff. And there's people from all over. There was a communication that went out, I think, last night, about how there's over 240 international media that are covering these finals. And I don't know if that's a record, but it does kind of feel like it. And why wouldn't there be international presence here? Like, this is a really, really great opportunity if you are trying to connect basketball to the rest of the world. And like, it's not just a United States sport, as I think Denver Nuggets fans know, and how connected Serbian fans and Serbian culture is to the NBA and to the Nuggets. So it's going to be crazy. I remember back to the regular season here, where sometimes there were 6 or 7 people sitting in the post-game pressers, like legitimately 6 or 7 people, because some of the TV folks have to go home because maybe it's not the most important game. because maybe it's an Eastern Conference opponent that doesn't really have a rivalry or whatever, but it was a different feel entirely. Where I walk into that same interview room today to try to get a spot, and it's standing room only because all of the seats are taken. There are cameras in the back, and like there's 20 different cameras, and the room is dark and lit so that it can only be focused on the interviewee. And it's just an entirely different feel. And it was pretty cool. Like it's definitely a cool thing for sure. But really interesting to see where it goes from here. Really interesting to see how the Nuggets really handle this. But as of now, they're pretty loose. Like they're pretty loose, but they seem to be wanting to get this done. I feel like when you're antsy like that, when you're having questions about rest or rust, then you are probably going to be a little bit bothered in terms of like, hey, I think KCP said it today in an interview. I wasn't in that one, but he said it today. I am sick and tired of playing my teammates. I want to go play an opponent. And that's a very fair thing. But it's also a thing that teams often say in training camp. I remember thinking that when I'm playing high school football back in the day of like, man, I'm so tired of going up against my teammates. I would rather go up against an opposing team. And everybody that plays sports has that too. You want to compete. You want to enjoy that moment. And now, obviously, this is at the maximum scale of that. And these guys are competitors to a fault. And they seem to be ready to go for sure. But I do know that part of this entire conversation is about, hey, how ready for this are the Nuggets? Are the Nuggets ready for what this is, what the NBA kind of is right now and what the finals are right now? Because it's a different beast. It really is. And there's talking about the media presence, all of the glitz and the glamour that you see at a lot of these other locations around the NBA, it's now being brought up and multiplied in Denver, where there's no glitz and glamour playing in the Denver market. That's just not how this market really carries itself from a basketball perspective. And that's fine. Like, I like it that way. But I do think that the intensity and the entire city and the entire area around the city is just buzzing right now about this. And I get it from everybody. I get people messaging me and texting me and trying to get into contact with me about, hey, know you've done Nugget stuff. This is really cool. And like, it does feel like that, just reconnecting from people from all over Colorado, which is really cool. But that's not a feeling that you would normally get for a December regular season game. Like, it's just not. And the Nuggets, I think, are experiencing that, and they're experiencing what they set out to do. All of the goals that they had at the beginning of the regular season, where they were talking to themselves and talking about their own personal expectations and what they were hoping for. And now you're really talking about fulfilling those goals in a way that even they may not have fully understood what it meant. Now, I think they believe they understood. I think that this group, when you have a guy like KCP who's experienced this before, he can parlay some of that wisdom onto some of his teammates. Jeff Green's been to the finals before. I don't think anybody else has been to the finals, but it does feel like to me that Denver has a lot of experience, like that's kind of lacking in this point, despite the fact that they have some guys that can really guide them through. This is Jokic's first time. This is Murray's first time. This is Porter's first time. Aaron Gordon, same thing. Like, all of these guys, this is one of the moments that they dream of. One of the moments that as competitors, they are living and dying by, trying to get to this point. And now that you're here, it's all like, it's never going to go fully smoothly. Like, there are going to be bumps in the road, just like there always are. It's not going to go perfectly swimmingly. You're going to have to fight through different things. And part of that is just the entire media experience and the entire circus that this is. Like, these guys may or may not be ready for it. And this is why I have this question up here. I do think the Nuggets are ready for this. I do think that they have that, that they are ready for that point. And if you're a first-time winner, like, there have always been first-time winners. The Warriors were first-time winners back in 2015, and I wrote an article on milehighsports.com that you should check out for sure. that talked about Nikola Jokić, Jimmy Butler, and why the Denver Nuggets and Miami Heat are the exact right teams for this moment in time in the NBA because of just how emblematic they are of what the NBA has been this year and what they need to be going forward. The Nuggets are that aspect of what they need to be going forward and how they need to continue to showcase Denver. And I compared them to the Golden State Warriors. I compared them to the 2015 Warriors, where obviously that Warriors team won 67 games. They were better from a regular season standpoint for sure than what the Nuggets were. But I do think that the Nuggets kind of sandbagged themselves in how they played at various points. They were but in general, the similarities are very striking. You have two superstars that are amazing, two amazing dynamic players that Steph is a once in a generation kind of magician of what he does. Jokic is very similar in that, and for some reason he hasn't really captivated that audience. And there are a variety of reasons for that, but one of the reasons is I don't think he's been showcased in the way that Steph Curry has been. And Steph Curry has continued to be showcased. And this has been kind of an 8 years going on thing, but there were a lot of people before the Warriors actually won that where they're like, we don't know if you're actually good, despite winning 67 games. They ran up against LeBron James, and LeBron, there were a lot of people that just believed that LeBron would do it. And to be fair, he got 2 games off of them, which was very, very impressive. That's not something that I think that they expected from LeBron when Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love both went down. But the reason why the Nuggets and the Warriors are so similar is because of their styles of play, because they're new, because they're fresh, and because they came about in moments where there was a lot of indecision and not mediocrity back in 2015, because you had some really great teams. But in terms of staleness, the Warriors as the new kid on the block, and then LeBron teams are all what a LeBron team looks like, and the Spurs, those are the teams that really were there. Also, the Boston Celtics were kind of broken up at that point, and that just you needed a different version, as were the Los Angeles Lakers. They were in a very downward spell at that point. So the Warriors came up and filled that void. Why can't the Nuggets? Why can't they do that? It seems like they are the exact kind of team with the exact fun style of play, a jovial superstar that's never in trouble, and just a really interesting group that's I think ripe for plenty of success for many years. Why can't they be the team that steps into this void where the entire NBA has been full of mediocrity throughout this entire season? And why can't the Nuggets be that kind of team? It to me seems like a great moment for them. But that's me talking about my article. But I think that they still have to step up to the plate. They still have to finish the job, and they still have to capitalize on the moment in a way that I think that they will. But I also know that things get weird. So we will talk about why it's going to get weird a little bit, but I do think that Denver's ready. I just know, just having watched what happened over the course of today, that the Nuggets are going to get tired of the media. They've been tired of the media for a long time, but this is a different beast. What this is going to look like is very, very different. And I am looking forward to what ultimately happens, because you just never know. You just never know what you're going to see. And maybe you're going to see a star born. Maybe you're going to see some weird stuff happen. So hopefully everything goes swimmingly, but we will talk about exactly what happens going forward. We'll be right back on Pickaxe and Roll. But first, everybody, this podcast, as you know, it's brought to you by our good friends over at Superbook. Bring that big bet energy this summer with Superbook Sports. They are the most trusted name in sports betting right now. And you can use promo code MILEHIGH to score up to $250 in their first bet bonus. Win or lose, they will match your first bet up to $250 with promo code MILEHIGH. I can think of a couple of things that you could put that money down on. I would definitely look at Jamal Murray and the points. That seems like a pretty good option there. Make sure to visit superbook.com for terms and conditions, or download the Superbook Colorado app in the app stores. Enter the promo code MILEHIGH and you'll get $250 courtesy of Superbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-522-4700. We will be right back on Pickaxe and Roll. And we're back. Pickaxe and Roll. Ryan Blackburn here. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. Appreciate all the love and support on the podcast as always. If you can, it'd be awesome if you could rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. I see some likes flowing in there. Thank you so much for liking the video. This is the 1,000th YouTube video on the MHS YouTube account. That is a crazy thing to say, and I'm just very happy to be a part of it. Very happy that we've seen as much growth on the channel as possible. And very happy that everybody's hopping in here to really do that. So thank you so much for helping this become a thing and for helping me continue to sustain. This is a big deal. 1,000 videos on the YouTube side. I didn't post all of those though. So like we've got plenty of people who are also contributing here. Make sure to go just subscribe to the MHS channel. See if we can get up to 2K subscribers by the time the finals are up. We are nearly there. We are, I think, at about 1.94. So like we're about 60 away. Let's see if we can get 60 people. That'll be very, very cool. All right. And Cedric asks, Ryan, can we ask questions? Yes. We will go back and forth between some of the questions that I already pre-assembled on this mailbag time. But yes, you can absolutely ask questions, and I will not blame you for doing so. This is a good opportunity for sure, and I'm looking forward to what people have to ask. So make sure to get them in the comments for everybody watching along live, and I'm going to start with a couple of the prefab ones, or not prefab, but the ones that were asked on Twitter. Cyberslash, he asks, is it a successful season if the Nuggets lose to the Heat? I thought this was an interesting one because you get to this point. This is the furthest the Denver Nuggets have ever been before. And somehow it feels like because they are such favorites over the Miami Heat, it feels like they should get to this, like they should win. It feels like this is a great opportunity for them. Hypothetically, if they don't win, it's going to feel bad. Like it really, really will feel bad based off of how much of a favorite they are and based off of what they've done to get to this point. That would be pretty awful if it were to happen. If Denver had faced the Celtics and just wasn't as good as Boston, like Boston would have been favored in that series. They would have had an extra home game. That series would have started in Boston. It would be a little bit different. But Denver's now the favorite. Like they are the team that should win. And I think that they have a great matchup advantage against Miami. So if they did lose, I think you can call it a failure. I think that every season, I don't actually, let me rephrase that. Every season that doesn't end in a championship, that doesn't make it a failure. I think in this particular case, because of the circumstances that we're now seeing with how dominant Denver has been in the playoffs and the opponent that they're currently facing, I think that it would be a failure. I think that this particular season would be a failure because it feels like everything has lined up for Denver, knock on wood, and that would be pretty stressful if they didn't actually get this done. But should be very interesting because, yeah, I mean, I think Cosmics, I think, says it here. You might never go to the finals again. So, yeah, it won't be a success. Like, they could never get back to this point. Jokić is 28. Next year, he'll be 29. The year after that, he'll be 30. We don't know how Jokić is going to age. We assume that he will continue to age and be, like, perfectly good and perfectly amazing at what he does. But we don't know. So, getting to this point, you have to take advantage. If you don't, then I do think it's an issue. Make sure to drop your questions in the comments if you have them. Phoenix asks, realistic predictions for player averages in this series. I think I'll start with Jokić on this one. This is one I've been thinking about for a little bit. What would it actually look like from a realistic perspective? Well, right now he's averaging about 30 points, 13 rebounds, and 10 assists, I think are the numbers. Let me just confirm that to make sure that's true. 30 points, 13 rebounds, 10 assists. What a holy crap. Yeah, he's leading the NBA in assists right now, which is really, really cool. Just doing that from the center position is insane. And it shows just how incredible he has been, but also how incredible the Nuggets offense has been while he's been out there, especially. I think, yeah, realistic averages for Jokic is that he continues to do the same thing: 30 points, 13 rebounds, 10 assists. Do I think it's going to be that high? I actually don't. I actually think that the Heat are going to load up on him for sure, and they're going to try to get him to pass, and they are going to have to overhelp because he will be dominant, and they are not going to be willing to let him go in single coverage the entire time. And if that's the case, then he's not going to average as many points, but I do think he'll average one or two extra assists. So if I had to guess on what he actually has, it's probably 26, 13, and 12. That would be my guess. Which, I mean, again, that's ludicrous. We've got some comments in here as well. Actually, no, let's keep going. Jamal, I think he's also going to average fewer points. I think he's going to have about 25, 5, and 5. That would be my guess on Jamal's stat line. He'll probably go about 50, 40, 90, or wherever he's been over the course of these playoffs. That feels about right to me. And I don't see players that are going to be super disruptive to him. Now, maybe it's slightly worse efficiency. Maybe it's closer to like 45, 38, 85. That's not bad. Like Denver can definitely win like that. It's just like if they can avoid crazy turnover totals and if they can avoid Jokic or Murray completely dropping off from their efficiency, then they have a really strong chance no matter what. So that would be what I'd expect there. And then we'll do Michael Porter here. I think Michael Porter is going to average more points than what he's averaged so far. I think he's at 14.6, if I'm not mistaken, for the series or for the playoffs. Let me just confirm that here. Yeah, 14.6 points per game. I think that's going to go up. I think he's going to average about 16 or 17 points a game. And it's going to look like more open shots versus zone. It's going to be some offensive rebounds. There are going to be plenty of opportunities there. And rather just be full on two-man game between Jokic and Murray, I do think that Porter's going to find some more opportunities. Like he's averaging about 11.7 shot attempts right now. I think that's going to go up. I think it'll be at like 13. And that's a good thing. Like you want him to be aggressive in this moment, and he's talented enough that he can hit those shots. So like you want him to take advantage of the zone. And he's the perfect guy to do so. Yeah, let's actually, I just saw a comment here. Cedric says, how many games do you think this series will go to, Ryan? I guess this is a weird time to actually answer this one, but I do think that this is going to go 5 games. I think that Denver wins this in 5. I think that Denver has a great opportunity to set the tone in games 1 and 2, where they have a little bit of a rest advantage here, where they've been game planning for the Heat a little bit longer than the Nuggets or than the Heat have been game planning for the Nuggets. And if that's the case, and if they are the better team, and if they are as prepared, and Miami is a little bit tired, if they are not as used to the altitude, then game 1 is a great opportunity for them. The series will be decided in game 2. I think that's fair to say. I think that if you think that Denver's going to win game 1, and I do, then game 2 is the one where Miami's bounced back a little from the altitude a bit. They'll have a little bit more energy that time around. Still 2 days off in between the games. You have game 1 on Thursday, game 2 on Sunday. So Miami will be able to adjust a little bit, but can they actually get that game? I would guess that game will be really close. I would guess that game would be the one that decides whether this series is going to go long or not. If Denver wins it, which I believe that they will, then I think that the series goes 4 or 5 games. Just because I think that Denver's capable of winning 1 or even 2 games in Miami. Like that's not the home court advantage that I just don't see that as a massive home court advantage from a crowd standpoint. But like maybe the vibe is just a little bit different, and maybe Denver gets a little bit bothered by it, or at least distracted by it. And maybe Miami is able to pull off 2 games there. Maybe that happens. I don't think it would. I think that it's more likely that the series goes 5 games than it does 7 games. That's the direction that I'd lean. I don't see a great path for Miami to do a lot of things, but I do think that they have some answers that they're going to throw at a wall and see if it sticks. And the ultimate thing for them is if they just bomb away from 3 and hit a lot of shots, then Denver that'll be tough. That'll be tough for Denver to have to match up with. But the differences between them and Boston is that Denver can score and they don't have to rely on outside shooting in order to score, which is just so irregular. Denver can get into the middle of the paint. And that is going to be such a key against a smaller Miami Heat team. So I think that Denver wins this series in 5 games. And that's basically all there is to that. All right. Let's go back to these questions. See, here we go. Rick B says, how many Nuggets 3-guard lineups would be, or how have the Nuggets 3-guard lineups been in the playoffs, and how effective would those be with MPJ at the 4 and Jokić at the 5? I actually looked at this on Cleaning the Glass and just wanted to mention this within this podcast. 3-guard lineups with Murray, KCP, and Bruce Brown on the court. Minus 3.8 net rating in 131 possessions. It hasn't actually been great. Hasn't actually been the thing that Denver has really benefited from. Now, some of those lineups are good and some of those lineups are bad. Like, it's not just negative in that. Like, and all the sample sizes are still pretty small. So, like, if you go on a 7-0 run or an 0-7 run, then that really flips the sample size around a little bit. But the fact is that Denver, they haven't been as good with the 3-guard lineups. And I'm not really surprised just because their identity right now is they are bigger, stronger, faster, and shoot over the top of all of these other teams. And Michael Porter at the 3 with either Aaron Gordon or Jeff Green at the 4, I think has been really beneficial for what the Nuggets have done. And that's been a big storyline. But if they do go to MPJ at the 4 and Jokić at the 5, I know that those configurations, especially with Murray, Bruce Brown, and KCP out there, those have been good. And I think that against the Heat, that's actually going to be a lineup that they have to play. Like, hypothetically, actually, it's going to be tough because maybe KCP is on Jimmy Butler in that case, or maybe Bruce Brown is on Jimmy Butler in that case. But I do think that those lineups, those particular groups with MPJ at the 4, they'll provide maximum spacing in terms of what the Nuggets need to do against the zone. And I know that like Bruce Brown would be in the dunker spot in that case. Jokić would be at the free throw line. Murray, KCP, and MPJ are on the perimeter. And Bruce Brown is also capable of rotating out to the 3-point line, especially on the right side, and hitting shots from the corner. Now you have him rotate out to the left side, and it's not as good. Like, that's actually something that was a very interesting statistical quirk that they just haven't done great there, or he hasn't done great there on the left side of the court. But Denver has options there. They can go to a lot of different things. The 3-guard lineup is something that they haven't really done a ton of during these playoffs, and for good reason. It just hasn't been as good as MPJ at the 3, and then Aaron Gordon or Jeff Green at the 4. I like that they have MPJ at the 3. I do think that there will be times for MPJ to go at the 4, but a lot of where Denver gets into trouble when they go with those 3-guard lineups is when they don't have the spacing at the 4, and they just don't make it work that way. So hopefully they can turn that around and it won't be much of an issue. Chad Shell, he asks, what's the likely bench rotation and how short will it be? This is an interesting one because I do think that Christian Braun will be back in the rotation. I think that 8-man rotation is likely where you go. 8-man rotation was working for the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, and then Christian Braun just wasn't a great matchup against LA, and that wasn't great for them. But he is a great matchup for Miami because you need switchable wings, switchable players that compete hard, that will battle on the glass, that aren't going to be taken advantage of there. Christian Braun can do that as long as he doesn't like get tied up in the moment, which I don't really expect him to, although like NBA finals are different from a national championship, though I do think that experience will help Christian for sure. He's just going to have to really concentrate on what his job is. And whether that's guarding Jimmy Butler, whether that's sticking to Caleb Martin and preventing him from going off, whether that is attacking the zone and trying to be a cutter, trying to be an offensive rebounder within the zone, or space it out and hit the threes that he has to hit, he's going to have to do it. But Denver will go to 8. Jeff Green's a good option in this series. Bruce Brown is a good option in this series. They've been reasonably stable throughout these playoffs for sure. And then Denver's got their 5 starters, and that's probably what it looks like. If I had to guess what it actually looks like from the bench perspective, like in the non-Jokić minutes, I would guess like they probably go back to their bread and butter of Murray, Bruce Brown, Christian Brown, Aaron Gordon, Jeff Green. Now, one of those issues will be zone defense, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit here, but I do think that Denver will have some perfectly fine times there, and they can always insert one of KCP or MPJ to be able to add some spacing to that group as opposed to somebody like a Christian Brown. So should be okay. I'm not really too concerned about it, but that is probably where they go to with their 8-man group. And the last one before we hit another break here. Who is most likely, actually, we'll do one more after that. Who is most likely, if anyone, to get added to the rotation off the bench? I've always talked about Zeke or Vlatko. Vlatko's actually in both games that the Nuggets played against Miami, if I'm not mistaken. He's in those lineups. He's played reasonably well during the regular season. And to me, that's another option that you can go to. A player that is smart, that knows what they're supposed to do, that could hit shots in like on the edge of the zone, and just knows how to attack said zone and getting the ball into the middle of the paint. Like so much about playing the Miami Heat is being smart and is operating under pressure and making the right decision. And what Vlatko does better than just about anybody coming off of that Nuggets bench is he knows where to move the ball. And sometimes he'll screw up an execution. Sometimes he may not be the right defender for a moment. I don't know if that's going to be the case against the Heat specifically. Like, I don't think he's going to be like Jimmy will attack him, but Gabe Vincent or Kyle Lowry or Caleb Martin attacking him is not like that to me is not that big of a deal. So if you throw Vlatko Čančar out there and maybe he's in place of a Jeff Green, or maybe he's in place of a Christian Brown, or like you go with 9 guys, that would be very interesting to me. Just to see what they get from a guy like Vlatko. That he's the guy that I probably trust most in this situation because he's played a lot of games for Team Slovenia in international play. Like that would be a very important piece of this. Like he's been in big games before. They just haven't been at the NBA level. So I don't think that Reggie Jackson's going to execute the defensive schemes that Denver needs to execute. I don't think that Zeke Naji is the right guy for this particular series, but maybe he is. Maybe that's a surprising one. But we're just gonna have to see. I think I'd probably put Vlatko as that guy, but you never know. Like I'm curious to hear what everybody else would think about that. Like, is Vlatko the right player there, or am I missing somebody on that front? I don't know. And then, actually, no, we'll take a break. We'll take a break at this point, and when we come back, we are going to discuss the rest of these questions. And I've got a monologue that I've planned towards the end of this podcast that I think you're going to want to stick around for. We'll be right back. But first, everybody, this podcast, as you know, we are associated with our guys over at Mile High Sports Radio. And I am going to play a clip here of the Sandy and Sean show, of which I was on this afternoon. So make sure to go check out Sandy and Sean and everything they do at Mile High Sports Radio. Here you go.
Hi, I'm Sean Drotar. This is Sandy Clough. Make sure you catch us from 2 to 4 p.m. every day on Mile High Sports, especially now, Sandy, as the Nuggets have the best chance ever to win an NBA title.
It's basically all Nuggets all the time at the present time, but we talk all sports from 2 to 4 every day.
That's right. Every team, every day, right here at Mile High Sports.
Really interesting to hear from Sandy and some of the perspective that he has. Sandy Clough is a Nuggets radio, or is a Nuggets legend, basically. like how he has done over the radio over the years, sports talk radio, and he covers all the sports, but he always has had a soft spot for the Nuggets for sure. I was on their show this afternoon, and we had a great conversation. You should make sure to go check that out. I think I retweeted that in my feed on Twitter. But there's just a lot that, like, I think about a lot of the Nuggets fans that have been around for ever, just trying to, like, and waiting for this kind of a moment in the city. And this is the first time dating back to the ABA days of 1976. So really cool to see Denver kind of evolve here. But let's get back into mailbag time, and we are going to go to zone defense from Paddington. How effective is Jokić in Denver versus zone defense? Seems to be a pretty big storyline, but I'm curious if Spo has some secret sauce. Yeah, I mean, zone is going to be interesting in this particular matchup for sure. I think that Denver, they are going to be bothered at times by the zone. And a lot of it's going to come with the non-Jokić minutes, which I'll answer in the next question. But Jokić specifically is the ideal zone breaker because you can get him into the middle of the floor. He is a big target, and he sees over the top of the defense. And usually in a zone, when you get somebody to the middle of the floor, they are then greeted by this 7-foot behemoth in the middle. That's not really the case with Miami. They don't have a guy in the middle of the zone. Like, maybe Cody Zeller can do some of it, but, like, I just don't think that Jokić will be bothered in the middle of the paint by a guy like Cody Zeller or even by a guy like Bam. Like, I think that those guys are, like, Jokić has had success against them for a reason. He's not going to be bothered by those particular guys. And then the great thing about Jokić is that he's always going to make the extra pass. So if there's any help or if there's any miscommunication from those guys and they get backdoor behind on a cut, and then the paint is wide open for either a layup or an offensive rebound. Like, Jokić and Denver have been fantastic against zone defense this year. And I would just not be surprised if I was reading Spo and was trying to say Miami, but then turned into Spurs. I would not be surprised if Spo tried that for Miami and was like, nah, this isn't going to work. And then they just didn't really do as much zone throughout that time. What I will say is on this next question from Matthew, this one is interesting. We know Jokić is really good at breaking zone defense, but if Miami implement it in the non-Jokić minutes, how confident are you in the Nuggets to navigate that? This is one where I think that they can do it. I think that they are a smarter basketball team than, like, the Boston Celtics or the New York Knicks or the Milwaukee Bucks. I think that that's the great thing about this Nuggets team is they have a lot to give from a basketball intelligence perspective, and the way that they continue to play around Jokić, I do think bleeds into some of those non-Jokić minutes as well, especially in the playoffs. But there is something to be said about, hey, you may not have the right personnel to break down a zone in the non-Jokić minutes. Like Aaron Gordon going to the middle of the paint. I don't think that Jeff Green is that guy. Maybe they put in Michael Porter in those moments, and they're like, okay, we're going to get Michael Porter into the middle of the zone, and he's either going to shoot or he's going to kick out, and that's going to be the initial aspect of that. I don't know if that's perfect. Like, it's probably not the perfect thing, and Porter, like, he can make those shots over the top of a team like that, but I do think that that's probably not what you want to have to do. So if you get into that position, if you're Denver, you better hope that Porter makes those shots. You better hope that Murray can hit some shots, kind of navigating into the crevices of the zone. Bruce Brown actually does that pretty well, where he can knife into the zone as long as he's getting all the way to the rim and not having to stop short into the floater zone too often. Then that's a big differentiator right there. But I do think that Gordon, like, he'll try to hit some turnaround twos in the middle of the floor. If he misses those, it's going to look pretty ugly. So that'll be something to watch. Denver's going to have to figure that out. The great thing about Jokić, though, is that he'll probably play about 40 to 42 minutes for most of these games. And so you're only talking about 6 to 8 minutes. And so 3.5, That's fine. Denver can make that work. Drunk Uncle Marky. Nice tag. He says, this seems like a perfect matchup for MPJ breakout. How important will he be in this series? I think it's going to be a good one. I think this is going to be a good matchup for Michael Porter. I think he's a guy that when you are trying to draw up what a zone breaker would look like for Denver, MPJ is a great one because people aren't going to be able to contest his shot at 6'10". He is a great option there for them to be able to score. And he's a great option there for him to cut and for him to grab offensive rebounds and make himself known on that end. I also think that it would be great if you were able to step up against Jimmy Butler when Jimmy inevitably seeks him out in one-on-ones on the defensive end. I think that MPJ is going to have to do that. I think he's going to have to step up on both ends of the floor. It's not just going to be the offensive end with him. Like it is going to be the rebounding. It's going to be the switching. It's going to be the guarding and trying to react to the actions that Miami likes to run, where they run Duncan Robinson off of DHOs. They run backdoor cuts. They have a lot of great designs that will get them some free points, even against like they got them against Boston. They'll get them against Denver. MPJ is going to have to step up in that regard. He's going to have to cover up as best as he can and read the floor really well. And something that he just hasn't done too terribly much. I think he's getting better. I think he's seeing the court a lot better than where he was even 2 years ago. And that is a great aspect of this, where you know that the pressure is going to get to some guys, but if you can see the floor, if you can read what's going on and you don't get too caught up in that, then you can still excel. And I think that MPJ could definitely still excel. So like I said in the second segment, I think that he's going to average 16, 17 points per game. Maybe it's more. Maybe it's more than that. Wouldn't surprise me if he got up to like 20. Would it be that surprising if he was at 12 points per game? Not really. Like, I think that there are things that are wishful thinking on my front from, hey, this is how he has to play. This is what he has to do. This is the perfect opportunity for him to step up just like this. And then if Miami's just better at that aspect of their defense than I expect, then maybe that's something that kind of goes by the wayside. So we're going to see, but I do think he's going to be important. I called him my X factor in last night's Den Vengers episode. So I do think that he is a big piece of this series, and there's going to be a lot there. 3 more questions here before I monologue, and I'm monologuing all the time, so take this with a grain of salt. BK19 says, lots of folks favoring the Nuggets, rightfully so, but what has to unfold to make this a long series or even a Heat series win? Also talked about this on the Den Ventures episode last night. I think that if Bam defends Jokić surprisingly better than a lot of people expect, then that's probably the biggest key. I don't know if that's going to happen. I actually doubt that that's going to happen, and it's one of the reasons why I predicted what I did. But I do think that if Denver has an opportunity here to put a lot of pressure on Bam, get him to do a little bit of foul trouble, put him into a situation where he feels overwhelmed and they have to change up what they're doing immediately, and then Denver sees those adjustments, and then they ultimately adjust to those adjustments and then solve what the Miami Heat are trying to do. That is the recipe for a short series. If you can't get to that point initially, and Bam has actually a much more challenging defensive matchup for Jokić than expected, then Denver, maybe they split. Maybe they split in Denver. And maybe that's the thing, that Denver does lose a game. Then you're probably looking at 2-2 coming back. And that is a pretty big issue if you're Denver. Like, not from a perspective of, hey, you can't win in that scenario, but you don't want this series to go long. Like, you'd rather, hey, you go up 2-0, then you try to get one in Miami, and then you get game 5 on the way back. That's the mentality that you have to bring. I don't know if that's actually going to happen. I don't know if Bam can actually hold up against Denver and against Jokić, but I do think that that is the right call here, that if Bam really struggles in that matchup, then it's going to be quick. If he's great in that matchup, it's going to be a long series. And Joshua, kind of in the same vein, do the Heat have the bigs plan B, C, or D to play behind Bam if he gets into foul trouble or Jokić gets a hold on him? This is part of it. I don't think that they have the options. I really don't. One of the great things about Rui Hachimura, even though Denver swept that series, I don't think they ever really fully figured that out. They just kind of played around it. I think that what Denver was able to do in that series was really impressive. But one thing about Hachimura is that he's thick, he's strong, and he is very athletic. And he's one of the guys that when they were talking about who could stand up to Giannis, who could stand up to Embiid, players like that, one of the reasons why Hachimura was drafted where he was, pretty sure he was a top 8 pick in like 2019, I think it was. Maybe it was 2020, one of the two. I do think that it was his size, it was his athleticism, it was the physical profile and what he was being compared to that actually made him a really interesting piece. And he was able to be more physical in that matchup, and Denver didn't really attack it in the way that they probably could. Miami doesn't have that. Miami does not have those kinds of guys. Kevin Love is not going to be able to handle that. Like, he's just not. Cody Zeller, if you put him out there next to Bam and have Bam roam, then the offense that Miami is going to have on the other end is going to really struggle. And that's just a part of the calculus that, okay, maybe if you play two bigs against Denver, then maybe Denver's offense slows down a little bit. But if your offense slows down even more, that's a problem. So that's going to be a thing. And then other guys that I guess they could try, maybe it's Caleb Martin or Jimmy Butler switching onto him and then Bam helping out at the back. That's just too small. That to me is not a great recipe for success if you're a Miami Heat fan or a Miami supporter. I wouldn't do that if I were them, just because like Jokic is going to eat that for breakfast. And then Haywood Highsmith, Omer Yurtseven, like these guys don't move me. Like they just don't from that perspective. I do not think that that's a thing. I do not think that Denver gets bothered by that. That is just not something that I'd be worried about. So to answer Joshua's question, no, they do not have the bigs to do much of what they need to if Bam gets into foul trouble or if Denver solves that matchup. Like that's just different. We will see what it looks like now. But final question here. Besides the best player in the world, this is from Tyler Freeze. Besides the best player in the world, what do the Nuggets have that every team Miami has beaten so far has not had? I'm going to say poise. I'm going to say actually strong poise and belief in that situation. I don't know if any of the other teams in the East did, if I'm being honest. It looked like Miami beat them down and bothered them and really broke their spirit in each of those series. Like Milwaukee, Drew Holiday was talking about how Jimmy was just going at him. Drew knew he could not stop him. Drew Holiday, like one of the best defenders in the world, could not do it. Brook Lopez, Giannis could not do it. None of those guys, they didn't have anything against Jimmy Butler. New York, I don't know if they actually believed in maybe they did, but I wouldn't believe in Julius Randle. I wouldn't believe in RJ Barrett. They've burned people too many times, and I think they burned New York fans in that series, just leaving Jalen Brunson out to dry for sure. And then if you're Boston, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown prove they had good moments. Jaylen Brown didn't have that many good moments. He was dribbling off of his foot, dribbling, losing the basketball, especially going to his left as many times as they did. They didn't have the poise. They didn't have the staying power for when Miami hit them. None of those teams did. When Miami hit them, they didn't have an answer. Just none. Nothing serious anyway. Denver, I think, does. I think Denver has that mentality. I think they have that belief in themselves, and I think they've weathered the storm in a lot of different ways to put themselves into a position where even if Miami comes out firing, Denver can respond because they know how good they are. They know how talented they are. And I think they're buying into their own hype a little bit, but in a good way, not necessarily in an unfortunate way. So I do think that Denver's in a great position there. They're going to have so much of what Miami's advantage was over those other teams was they had a mental advantage. I don't think that the Nuggets have a mental disadvantage against Miami. That's for sure. What's Jokic going to do? Get bothered by trash talk? No, that's just not who he is. Murray, like, he feeds off of that trash talk. Like, that's just what gets him going. And you know that even if Denver goes down 3-1, knock on wood, they can still come back from that because that's just who they are. That's who they have been. So I think that Denver, like, they're in a great spot. Like, they have the belief in themselves. Their stars believe in each other. And it just feels like this is a team of destiny, which leads me to my final monologue here. This is just like, this is the time. Like, we had this question earlier about, like, is this season a failure if Denver doesn't win the title? It might be. And the reason for that is because it feels like everything has lined up. Everything is lined up for what the Nuggets have wanted. There was a thing going on around Twitter today. Some bozo from LA was saying, yeah, this is one of the weakest runs of all time that the Nuggets have gone through. They're like the weakest in the generation, the weakest title, the weakest ring in a generation. And that bothers me for one thing, like, for one reason. But, like, here are the two reasons why it's wrong. Here are the two reasons why that's wrong for sure. Is that Denver is the only team in the NBA that's risen above this morass of mediocrity, where all of these other teams have been mid, every single one. Denver's had their moments too. Like, during the regular season especially, they were apathetic. Defense was a concept to them that they just didn't really want to deal with in the first 20 games of the year. And then in the last 15 games of the year, they're like, we've already clinched. What do we need to do? And despite the fact that they had a super easy schedule down the stretch, they didn't really need to do anything. And they lost some games that they probably should have won. You could say that about the first 20 games as well. So I think that Denver left some points on the table. I think they left some wins on the table. And as a result, like, their numbers look a little bit worse than what they actually are. But that doesn't excuse the rest of the NBA. None of the NBA teams actually have that. But the other reason is this. Even though Denver kind of struggled a little bit, Denver still got the 1 seed. They played the teams that are in front of them. It's not Denver's fault that they played the Minnesota Timberwolves. Like, Minnesota's going to have their time, or they're going to blow it up. Like, we're going to find out one way or the other. But Anthony Edwards is fantastic. Like, he's going to be great. Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, they would have beaten the Los Angeles Lakers. I firmly believe that. Like, Devin Booker and Kevin Durant and the Phoenix Suns did not look as good as Denver, and they didn't look as good because of Denver. Like, Denver did a lot of things to bother them, and they did a lot of things to wear them down, and ultimately that series looked a little bit worse. But part of that was because Denver was just the more talented team, and it wasn't really close at the end of it, especially with the injuries that Phoenix ultimately dealt with, because they were an older team and because they just weren't as in position to do this as Denver was. And then lastly, the Lakers. Like, a lot of people talk about the Lakers. A lot of people talk about, hey, maybe this is their time. Maybe this is their run. They could definitely score on Denver. And they did. But they also just couldn't stop Denver at all. LeBron James is fantastic. Anthony Davis he's Anthony Davis. And I think that Denver pantsed him. Denver just absolutely rolled through. And it did not matter whether any of the teams that they would have played in the West. It didn't matter if Denver had played the 2 seed, the 3 seed, and the 4 seed. They had to play the 8 seed because that was a requirement, because that's just what is required. And then they played the 4 seed. They played a team that was favored over them, and it didn't matter. I think that the Nuggets, at this point, I think they've proven that no matter who they were facing in the Western Conference, they would have come out of it. Maybe it's just a down year for the West. I think that's fair to say. Maybe it's just a down year for the NBA because of how much parity there is in the NBA today. It's why the NBA should want the Nuggets to succeed. It's why they should want them to shine on the biggest moment, the biggest stage, the biggest moments, and everybody talk about how fan-freaking-tastic Jokić is. Because you can market that dude. You absolutely can. And say, this is the next iteration of the Golden State Warriors. Look at how fun they are. Look at how incredible they are. Look how connected they are. Look at how interesting the style of play is. Look at how interesting the superstar is. Like, look at how compelling this team is. There's a lot there. And if you are missing it, then you're wrong. You just are. And I think that this is a great time for Denver. This is a great time for them to take advantage of this because they are going to have plenty of time. They're going to have plenty of time to do it. And I am looking forward to all of this. Like, it starts tomorrow, Thursday night, game 1, but I'm looking forward to the absolute zoo that it is about to be. And it's going to be a great experience. And I hope all Nuggets fans can enjoy it too. Hopefully it comes with some wins. That'd be cool too. Michael, can you hit that outro music for me, my friend? That is going to do it for this episode of Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at Superbook Sports. Thank you so much for hopping in on this final preview before the NBA Finals begin. Really appreciate everybody for the asking questions. Really appreciate everybody for hanging out with me at this stage. We have some folks in here. Really appreciate you for sticking with me this entire time. Should be a lot of fun. Tomorrow's podcast, we'll be recapping game 1. Going to be really exciting. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Hit that like button on the way out and hit that subscribe button for the 1000th video for Mile High Sports. Thank you so much. Talk to you guys tomorrow.